I'm 36 years old and recently found out that I have AUDHD. And suddenly, my whole life just makes sense. I always felt different, I guess. Too much, too sensitive, too reactive. And for most of my life, I thought the problem was me. Until one day, at 36 years old, I was diagnosed with AUDHD, a combination of autism and ADHD. Who'd have thought it? The thing is, though, the signs, the kind of underneath inclinations that this was happening was always there. I was nonverbal until I was 2. I was incredibly sensitive to sounds and changes in routine. I had big emotions. And when I say big, I mean like full on tantrums that seemed to come out of nowhere. All the way through my teens and, dare I say it, even into adulthood. I was hyperreactive, overwhelmed by the world, and yet no one ever thought to look a little bit deeper. I was just labelled the difficult child. The outspoken one, the one who thinks outside of the box or talks a bit too much. As a child, I was nonverbal until I was 2 years old. I was extremely reactive and emotional. I was highly sensitive to sound, texture, and changes happening in my environment. I had an intense interest and hyperfixations on subjects. I was socially anxious, but really loud in safe spaces. I struggled with transitions and unpredictability. I much preferred routine and things to stay the same. And as I got older, I guess I just learned to hide all of that, and not very well. The thing is, it didn't take long for me to realize that the world kind of didn't make space for people like me. So, despite not knowing why things were as they were, I learned to mask. I forced myself to make eye contact, or at least look at people's mouths when they're talking. I studied the way others talked and laughed and tried to mimic it. I learned the right things to say in conversations, even if it felt a little bit unnatural. And I learned to hold back my tongue of things that I wanted to say, things that were maybe a bit more direct and to the point. I kind of developed an alter ego to the world, one that I desperately wanted to be, but I kind of struggled to stay aligned with. And I'd beat myself up for not being able to keep up with others or for feeling overwhelmed at things that I didn't consider to be overwhelming. I pushed myself to be exposed to large crowds and social interactions, and I actually learned to start to thrive in these situations. I used to be a competitive pole dancer, and within the pole dance industry, there's so much social interaction. And to be honest, I loved it. I craved community and connection, but I always needed breaks away, time on my own. And after any event, it would kind of take me a few days to regroup and to gain my strength back. And I had to spend a lot of that time in solitude. Because the thing about masking is it is exhausting. It's like constantly performing a role that wasn't written for you. And over time, the weight of that performance, it absolutely crushed me. So I decided to get tested after a recommendation from a friend. And lo and behold, I'd spent years feeling burnt out, constantly cycling between pushing myself too hard and crashing. I struggled with relationships. I was called too intense, or I always thought I was too much for people. I overcommitted and then felt like a failure when I couldn't keep up with all these things that I'd planned. Yet for so long, I thought I was just really bad at life. But it turns out I wasn't. It turns out I'm just neurodiverse. But why did this go unnoticed? Why did no one question, there might be something more going on with Lorna? Well, the answer is because I'm a woman, because I'm a girl, because I'm female. Because for years, girls weren't considered hyperactive enough to have ADHD. Because autistic girls are more likely to be seen as shy, or in my case, a perfectionist, rather than struggling with a different brain wiring. And that's the truth. Did you know that 80%, I think it is, of autistic women remain undiagnosed by the age of 18? ADHD is 3 times more likely to be diagnosed in boys, yet girls are just as likely to have it. And women with ADHD are often diagnosed with things like anxiety or depression first, because that's how their symptoms kind of present. For me, I was actually misdiagnosed with borderline manic depression at the age of 16. I didn't have manic depression, I was just neurodiverse and struggling with trauma. Crazy how society has shaped it so that women like myself have spent their whole life wondering what was wrong with them. What's wrong with me? And then at 36, I get my answer. I found out. And my diagnosis wasn't just a label. It was like a homecoming, a moment where I realized, oh my goodness, I was never broken in the first place. My brain is just a little bit different to other people. And in that moment when they told me, I cried tears of grief, oh, for the little girl who thought she was too much, for all the things that I'd experienced. But I also cried tears of pride for the woman who had survived it all without ever knowing why, and achieved so much in life despite it. And in that moment, I realised having ADHD, autism and ADHD has actually been my superpower all along. Because the very traits that may have once felt like obstacles are actually the exact things that made me achieve success in my career. Let me explain. Deep, unconventional thinking. Well, it's actually trailblazing wisdom. My mind doesn't just follow the script, it questions it. ADHD brains are wired to see patterns, make deep connections, and kind of challenge outdated systems. While others stay within the lines, I didn't know, but I was actually redrawing them. And this means I've never been satisfied with kind of surface level healing. Hence why I've spent so long innovating an approach that actually works. Why I kind of pour myself into ancient philosophies and healing. And that comes down to hyperfocus, which actually we could reframe as mastery and innovation, because people with ADHD don't just learn something, they dive in, they dissect it and they master it. My ability to hyperfocus has allowed me to explore the depths of healing, spirituality, and human behavior, far beyond what most people ever will. My teachings are coming from a level of dedication and synthesis with that a neurotypical mind often doesn't reach. And that leads me to think of things like my sensory sensitivity is actually more things like my intuition and embodiment. So my heightened sensitivity to sound, energy, emotions, and environments isn't a flaw. It's actually a gift when I look at it in the way, because I can pick up on what others miss. I feel energy shifts in a room. I understand nuance in ways that others might overlook. This has made me pretty much exceptional at being able to hold space for healing, for deeply intuitive sessions, and being able to guide people to the exact root of what they need. My hypersensitivity has allowed me to tap into my intuition so much. And then when I think of like negatives about autism and ADHD, like rejection sensitivity, actually, that's like radical empathy. Feeling things deeply means I understand people on a soul level. My own experiences with not feeling understood, masking, struggling in systems not built for me, have made me a fierce advocate for authenticity. I don't just help people heal, I show them what it means to be fully themselves. And I want the whole world to be liberated. I'm here for collective liberation, guys, and I understand that it comes from individual liberation first. And that's the thing as well, is that as someone with ADHD, I've been constantly seeking stimulation, but actually that means I've been living outside of the box, because boredom is unbearable for ADHD minds, which means I am always evolving, learning and expanding. I've never been afraid to break the rules, forge my own path and create something completely unique and new. And I never knew why, but actually it's my superpower of ADHD. ADHD was never the problem. It was actually the blueprint. And I can see now what once made me feel too much is exactly why I'm here doing what I do. My intensity, my depth, my refusal to conform, it's all been part of the plan. My difference isn't a limitation, it is my magic, and I am here for it. And if this resonates with you, if you've spent your life feeling different, feeling exhausted or misunderstood, and you are not alone, I can tell you that for now. And there is nothing wrong with you. Your brain might actually just be wired differently. And if you're watching this after a diagnosis, then heck yeah, it is. And that is not a flaw, it is a strength. I can tell you that from personal experience. But I know that your struggles are valid, your experiences are real, and you deserve support. You are not broken at all. You just need to tap into a different side of the world, of the universe. And if you suspect yourself, or maybe even your children might be neurodivergent if you're watching this, don't be afraid to seek answers. Look, I personally hate the whole, I don't want to let my child to have a label. As an adult who struggled undiagnosed all my life, I say get the label for your child because the world is going to label them anyway. Or you, if you don't want a label for yourself. And those labels are actually not going to be very nice and they're not going to be true. They're going to be ones that people give you. They're going to be things like, oh, she's the difficult child or the intense child or the hyperactive child or the unruly child or whatever it is. The world is going to label you and your children anyway. So take control of that and make sure it's the right label and the world can start actually understanding, as can you, as can they. Whether through things like self-discovery or a formal diagnosis like yourself, knowing yourself changes everything. I can't even but tell you. And no matter what, this is the truth. You are already enough. Already enough. Thank you for being here and letting me share this part of my journey with you. If you've been through something similar, I would love to hear your story. Drop a comment below. And if you're on this path of self-discovery, just know that you are never alone in this. This place here, this community is where you're going to find your liberation. So make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more content on self-discovery, healing, and living life on your terms.